Thanks, folks. I've got to say it's a real pleasure to be here at Strathclyde University. So I can't actually believe we got this year, you know. And it's great to see Scottish Futures Trust, great to see Mansour from EEBT, formerly now Ofcom, Strathclyde University. This journey for us started in 2016. And in Inverness, we got a group of people together. And it's delightful that we've actually got a real working project, and I think it way exceeds anything we ever dreamed possible back in 2016. I was out in Cisco in San Jose a couple of weeks ago presenting to a worldwide sales force, and what I realised, especially when other people talked about this project, this is one of the leading 5G trials in the world. It's very, very different. Might not be stretching the 5G technology in terms of speed, but in terms of the ambition and scale, we've actually knocked it out of the park, as they say. So I'm going to talk about the business model and trying to bring things together a little bit, and I'm going to talk about some of the elements that really contribute, what we call the business layer cake, the different layers that will help contribute to solving the business case round about rural connectivity. There's not a single magic bullet that's going to solve it. There are different layers, and we're going to talk about them. And in Orkney, we've found lots of them. So let's go talk about that. I even seen it in one of the technology newspapers last week, the challenge of rural connectivity, but nobody lives there. And if you ever go about in some of these rural areas, you realise there's a lot happening. So I'd like to talk about what we found with a couple of statistics to back it up. You know, for example, in the UK, we've got 16% of the gross value add of the whole economy comes from rural areas, 27% in Scotland from rural areas, yet we still struggle to fund the connectivity. Just tying back to what Des said earlier on, this slide here really says there are different ways to look at it, driving down the cost of the technology, of the spectrum, and raising up the revenue opportunity. And I'd like to talk about the opportunities we see for service providers and the suppliers into the ecosystem to collaborate in a different way, to drive different ways of thinking, to actually drive business opportunities for the service provider and for the businesses in these rural areas. Let's see. Okay, so let me talk about what we call the business layer cake, and just building on what Des said earlier. In the traditional model, it's all about the consumer. As we look at the rural areas and we turn the model upside down, we think about all of the opportunities, especially with 5G and IoT, that come out when you move into the rural areas, the opportunities to provide not only consumer-led services, but enterprise-grade vertical industry services. And it's these vertical industry services and being creative about providing new solutions to their problems that could be the opportunity to help contribute in a big way to the problem of rural connectivity. And if we break it down a little bit, the traditional model is to focus on consumer voice, consumer internet data, and we all use that for both work and for our own domestic purposes. But if you actually start to build out the layers, you know, what are the opportunities that a good mobile network could provide? We've already seen the benefits that the Emergency Services Network is bringing to mobile coverage. With that government investment, we're driving a lot of coverage in areas where there wasn't before. But if you think over and above that, what about the industry? What about the public services in the rural areas? And areas like tourism, I'm going to talk about that. How can the various parts of the ecosystem there help contribute to solving the connectivity problem? We've talked about agriculture today. Let's talk about the business model and how you form a coalition to address the challenges of connectivity around about farms. Only 17% of farms in the UK have a 4G signal, and they are prevented from using some of the new technologies. There's a $1 trillion agricultural revolution going to come across the next couple of years, and we need to be ready for that. Lots of countries across the world need to increase food production, and we need to help support that, and connectivity is a key part of doing that. Also, you can't go far in Scotland without thinking about our biggest exports. Whisky is the biggest export, much of it in connectivity-starved areas. Farmed salmon from Scotland is not only the #1 food export from Scotland, it's the #1 food export from the whole of the UK. yet it's connectivity challenged. So I'm going to talk about these areas and potentially suggest new business models there. And that's before we think about connected everything, connected roads, you know, looking at rural areas, beauty spots. How do you make sure the bins are not overflowing? How do we make sure there's no black ice on the road? These are opportunities for connectivity services across roads that we need to start thinking about to provide, as an ecosystem, a viable way for delivering connectivity, safety, pleasure for our community. And then, obviously, in the future, we're going to have autonomous cars. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to have one that just works to the edge of Glasgow and then stops. So we need to think about how's that going to happen in the future. One of the areas that we've chatted about, Andrew from the BBC and the team there, they've got a great demo and a whole lot of impressive kit out there. And this is one area when we formed the project back in December of 2017. When the BBC came on board, I thought, wow, this is really different. Because there's a great opportunity for broadcasters to start thinking about transitioning to one network. Why do we have 3 or 4 or 5 networks today for broadcast? Satellite, cable, optical, you know, mobile networks. Andrew and the team and Chris have absolutely pioneered radio broadcast over 5G, but the real opportunity there is to have all of the all of the broadcast capabilities being delivered over a mobile 5G and IP network. And certainly that's the way the BBC, I can see they want to start moving. They've had great feedback in the radio trial. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But that's a great opportunity for service providers. But it's only going to be an opportunity if there is pervasive coverage. Because organisations like the BBC, if you don't mind me saying, Andrew and Chris, you want to provide a public service. So that means to everybody. So if the network's not there, terrestrial broadcast will remain. But we could switch off terrestrial broadcast with the right kind of investment in our networks. And that's one slice of the layer cake, as we call it. I'd like to just let Andrew do some talking here and Chris on the video. I'd like to just reflect a little bit on the BBC broadcast trial. They've got a great video. And actually, as you see this and you see this video, you'll see how rural the areas are, how the challenges are, and what it does to the community. And actually, as you go through watching this, just imagine if we had pervasive mobile coverage and we could do to all parts of the UK like Andrew and the team have helped done in Stronsay. So just we'll watch this little video here.
So we're here on Stronsay in Orkney. To get here, we had to take a flight from London up to Aberdeen, then another hop on from Aberdeen to Kirkwall, and finally a ferry to reach the island of Stronsay.
We have a beautiful island here and we're trying to encourage more folk to come here. At the moment we have very poor internet connection. Some folk it takes them about 10 minutes to download an email.
Studying with the Open University can be a challenge, getting online to do the live seminars and things. That can be a struggle.
And you can imagine that if you're trying to make a living through using the internet, that's just not possible here.
So we're here as part of the 5G Rural First project, and the aim of the project is to look at delivery of broadcast radio services over 5G.
So we're in the loft at Stronsay Junior High School, and this is the base station. Cloudnet have now installed the aerials. So ideally we'll get to the point where we have the phones working with the radio services on them and people getting internet on them. But to get from where we are now to get to that point, it's going to be a challenge, I think, let's just say. But we've got a good team of people on the case, so hopefully we'll be all right. Working. Hey. On the phones.
Well done.
Thank you.
So that's fantastic progress from the BBC. I think that's a great video. They've had fantastic feedback on the trial. So really we're starting to demonstrate, actually, you know, there is a business case starting here. Service providers could help make some money. We could help them make some money by these kind of services, even in rural areas. A real key part of the business model has got to be IoT. It can't all be consumer-led because, all the analysis says we'll not make much more money for mobile operators. So we've got to think about those enterprise use cases. So we've talked earlier on about our agri-tech use cases, for example, low latency. We don't need 5G download speeds for this particular use case. We need 5G upload speeds for this particular use case. We don't need pervasive 5G everywhere. We just need it where we need it. Farms are one, salmon farms are another. So there are ways of thinking slightly differently about how we roll out 5G where it's particularly needed. And actually, we spent a bit of time talking to all the great farming agri-tech suppliers, Duncan, Ivan, and so on. There really is a key here for farming, and that's the farming cooperative. So for any service provider wanting to go out and chat to the farms, you don't talk to individual farms, you talk to the cooperatives who bring together thousands of farms at a time. That's a lot easier to think about a volume business model. And the farms are not interested in a 3-month contract. They want something pretty solid for 5 years. How many people want to sign up to a subscription model for 5 years? Maybe outcome-based, like Ivan Adonovich mentioned, related to feeding and the productivity. We've got to think the Google way, as it were. How do we have a new business model that brings everything together? And I'm going to talk about that in the context of salmon in particular and in agriculture later on. Okay, again, another application, connected cows. Again, that is a subscription model for the app rather than the connectivity. So that's the strategic question. Are we going to keep selling connectivity as a raw set of data packets, or is there going to be an ecosystem together that pulls that together and sells a solution to the customer? So I'll propose a structure for that later on. Tourism. It's a huge business in Scotland and across the UK. £11.5 billion business. How do we make money from that? And connectivity, look at these stats from Visit Scotland. If you've ever been in Scotland, especially in the summer, you get this West Highland midge that bites you and makes your life miserable. But it's not as big a problem as connectivity, as you can see from that chart there. Yeah? Okay. Let's think about how we transform that tourism experience. Let's think about the Ring of Brodgar and the work that Malcolm, the guys at Strathclyde have done, really emphasising this place of useful learning. They have built out a network across the tourist route with Wi-Fi on the buses. But Wi-Fi on the buses is great. It's great, right? It's not really everything you want to transform the tourism industry. So think about this Ring of Brodgar. Let's go to Orkney. So I was lucky to go up there on an absolutely stunning day in January. Look at it, middle of nowhere. Absolute middle of nowhere. What are the problems on this tourist site? It's unmanned. There's nobody there to explain what it's about. There's not even a tourist office. It would waste the landscape. There's also parking challenges, How do we think about transforming that? We've actually invested additional. I've always said Cisco would invest over and above. We invested with living pop-ups. You'll see them out in the stand out there. A fantastic augmented reality application. It's not a demo. It's a full app for Orkney with about 16 different visitor sites. Again, it comes back to the question, what are we going to sell? The connectivity or the app? How do we collaborate together and build an ecosystem that delivers a solution for tourism? We could sell the app, the likes of, to help maintain the cloud network. Different approach to selling connectivity. And it could make money from the tourists. Orkney gets 340,000 tourist visitors a year at the present rate. They have challenges managing the numbers. They have challenges with the tourist experience. Technology could help really solve some of those problems. So you'll see that demo outside. One of my favourite examples in Scotland is the salmon industry. The salmon industry, you might think they just have fish there, they grow the fish. It's absolutely tech heavy. And they really have a connectivity challenge in many of their sites. They have over 200 salmon farms. And a large number of these are in areas of poor connectivity. It's a major export for the UK, the number one food export. How do we transform this? This is the Scottish Sea Farm site where we're working with to put on the water sensors to help prevent issues with fish health, to reduce waste within the food processing, to save money. Each one of these pens contains about £500,000 worth of fish. Think about the new generation of technology that's coming in, not just to prevent issues with fish health, but to help reduce the cost of fish feeding. It's the number one cost in the salmon industry is how much feed they put in. It's a manual process today. They just basically chuck it into the pens. There are new technologies with 4K and 8K video with machine learning that the industry wants to deploy, that they can deploy in Norway but can't deploy in the UK. That would help reduce their overall costs. So think about what could happen if we got together, and we have been talking to the CIOs of Scottish Salmon. We're starting to talk to the suppliers, with the technology suppliers, with the salmon industry, with the service providers. Can we get a model that says, we save you money on feeding your fish. That helps fund the connectivity as a solution. Can we bring together those partners? We have started to talk through with various people on how they do that. And then you see it's not just about simple IoT services, it's 4K and 8K video upload from the pens. That's definitely got to be a 5G use case. So there is a need in the rural areas for some of these advanced use cases. And we've got other use cases that census are doing. You'll see them outside as well. You'll see the public health water sensing, looking for Legionella. Today, that's a manual process, measured once a month. Somebody goes around all the sites across the Highlands. Census are doing that through our network, onto the 5G network with every 10 minutes a sample. And think about the productivity input. But that's got to, again, go into a model where the benefit gets shared so that we can fund the connectivity, so that the sensor companies can sell their equipment, so that the community benefits. It's got to be win-win-win all round. So how do we make it happen? Let's go through this left to right. And let's look at the agri-tech example. We worked this out for agri-tech first. Today we've got an app provider, and they're relying on the traditional MNO business model if they have mobile connectivity, SIMs and data. It could be improved if there was a bit of revenue sharing, because the technology providers like Afimilk, they can't sell their stuff unless they've got connectivity. And the service providers need to have some revenue stream in a rural area where there are not enough consumers. Add on to that a 5-year contract, makes it much more stable for the service provider community. Add on to that are the question, this is a strategic question for the service providers, are they going to lead that, or are they going to just keep providing data cards and SIM packs? Because if they do that, the real challenge is they'll have an SI comes in who will own that business, a systems integrator who pulls all that together and they make the profit. Add into that the whole notion of cooperatives or the ecosystem. And how do we get all the players together, farming solution vendors with groups of farms in a cooperative? You've suddenly got a mass market on your doorstep with a one contact into the cooperative. It's got to be a different way of thinking about how we do the business models for 5G. And some of these areas are what we're looking for new business models to enable revenue streams different to the data cards and SIM cards that we have today. So just to wrap up, we have lots of challenging opportunities in rural areas. And to add on to what Des said, challenges are opportunities, ranging from sharing of infrastructure like Smart Rural are doing there, low-cost innovative radios, you'll see them from Amarisoft, Parallel Wireless, new thinking like putting stuff on lighthouses. Then you combine that with the revenue upside from enterprise, vertical industry business models. It can no longer be a consumer play. And we've got to go with the notion of building it where it's needed, where there's an anchor tenant, like salmon farming, like agriculture. These are different ways to think about it. Combine that with the likes of local providers like CloudNet, enable them to be neutral host operators, collaborate across the service providers and local providers, and we've got a different way to look at rural connectivity. It's been a real challenge getting all of this out in 20 minutes. I think I've just about made it, Des. He's lost money, which I'm delighted about. So thanks very much, folks. It's been a great experience, fantastic here. Great to be here at Strathclyde University, a place of really useful learning. So thanks very much, and hopefully this provides some illumination in what we've been doing over the last 10 months. Thanks.